come on, now it's gonna rain. Alright, I'm gonna go to a different server temporarily. I figured night would end eventually. Man, they make it way too long. Like, they might as well just shut down the servers. Oh, that server has a queue. I don't have any idea what any of that means. That's only 10 people. Yeah. Rougher any raider. What? And we do not live, not multiple days. What the hell? That's my million retarded wrote that description. And this server's laggy. That shit's too laggy. I think I'm just going to give it a second and maybe try to get back on this one. Yeah, that's awesome. That's my favorite time of day there. I should take that glow stick off before I try to log out, but I guess I'll chance it.
Unless you've been living under a rock lately, you know that today there's a huge solar eclipse event happening. They're calling it the Great American Eclipse because I think this is the first time in like 300 years when the eclipse fell only on the United States. That and because it drives a truck, eats massive portions of food, and loves guns. Make America dark again. The word eclipse comes from the Greek ekleipsis, which means to be abandoned, which gives you a good idea of how we interpreted eclipses for a very long time, as the sun god abandoning his people for a moment, or another god casting out the sun god for a brief period of time. It was often attributed to mythological animals devouring the sun, or the sun dying and being reborn again. Today, of course, we know that it's the moon getting in the way of the sun, but we've actually been able to use this event to make all kinds of scientific discoveries, from Hipparchus figuring out how far the Earth is from the sun to proving Einstein's general relativity. From the beginning, our obsession with eclipses has helped move technology and science forward. In fact, some say that eclipses are what first spurred humans' interest in astronomy. I mean, I think it's pretty hard to overstate how much seeing the sun go out in the middle of the day would get your attention. Eclipses have always held that level of fascination with us, as well they should, because the total eclipse as we experience it is so improbable that it kind of makes you start asking some really big questions. The solar eclipse is such a remarkable event because the moon doesn't just cover up the sun. It does it perfectly. The moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, but the sun is 400 times further away from the Earth, which makes them look exactly the same size in our sky. This is an amazing coincidence. It's just not something that you notice most of the time because the sun is so bright in the sky, it kind of dominates everything, so it's impossible to actually see that. But you do see it in the eclipse. In a total solar eclipse, the moon's shadow forms a penumbra, where you can see a partial eclipse, and an umbra where the sun is blocked out completely. And the moon's umbra comes to a point that is perfectly focused on the surface of our planet. This is why we get that perfect ring around the sun, this coronal halo where you can see the sun's atmosphere. If the moon were any closer, the moon would cover that halo and just turn it into night. Any further away, and the moon wouldn't fully cover the sun, what's known as an annular eclipse, which is really more like a transit. But for us, somehow, it lined up perfectly. The number of factors involved to make this happen are astronomical. Pun intended. It's almost as improbable as life itself. In fact, you could make a Drake's equation out of this. Actually, let's do that. I propose to you the Scott equation for solar eclipses. Because I want my name on something, damn it. And the equation is this. N equals N sub R times F sub M times F sub P times N sub A times L. N sub R is the number of rocky planets in our galaxy. And I'm cutting out the gas giants for two big reasons. One, in order for the shadow to fall on a surface, then you need some kind of surface for that shadow to fall on. And the gas giants don't really have a surface to speak of. Now this isn't just about semantics. If the umbra were to fall to a point and that point is below a cloud line, then there's no way to actually view the eclipse from that point. And if that sounds like a technicality, fine, but I would just fall back on the whole philosophical question: if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody there to hear it, did it really fall? So I'm only counting rocky planets because that's the only place where you could actually stand to view this, which knocks 4 planets out of the equation already. F sub M stands for the number of those rocky planets that have a moon. And I've talked before about how rare and special our moon is, and even in our own solar system, there's only one other rocky planet that has any moons, and that's Mars, with Phobos and Deimos. But those are really more like captured asteroids. And they do make eclipses, but they're more like annular eclipses. They're really more like transits. So that rules out all the planets in our solar system. We're only 2 variables in. F sub P is the fraction of rocky planets with moons whose orbits cross the plane between the planet and the sun. Because if the orbit of the moon never brings it between the planet and the sun, then you got no eclipse. Now this one might not be as rare because in general orbiting objects tend to work along the same plane as the solar system. But this goes back to the question of just how rare our moon is. If the moon was created by a Mars-sized planet slamming into Earth, and that's what's required for small rocky planets to get big moons, then it's possible that that collision could cause the moon to be on a different plane than the rest of the solar system. But the big one is N sub A, or the number of moons that fit the angular alignment to cause the moon to perfectly cover up the sun the way ours does. With the Earth, the magic number is 400. Again, the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, but the sun is 400 times further away. How rare is this? It turns out there is one other moon in our solar system that meets this requirement, and that's Jupiter's Callisto, due to its vast distance away from Jupiter and its large size. Callisto is 179.3 times smaller than the sun, and the sun is 179 times further away from Jupiter than Callisto is. But the whole gas giant thing rules it out. Now, if you want to count it on a technicality and say that at least it shows that it could be possible more than once in a solar system, then cool, you can factor that into your equation. And the last variable, L, is for length of time. Drake included time in his equation because it's logical to assume that the amount of time that a species could be putting signals out into the universe is finite. I'm including it for the same reason. Because the moon moves further away from the Earth 1.6 inches per year, which means eventually we're not going to have total eclipses anymore. They're only going to be annular eclipses. But luckily that's not expected for another 600 million years or so. And this slow progression away from the planet should be true for most moons due to orbital dynamics, so the amount of time that that total solar eclipse would be possible is finite. So what are your best guesses for these variables? Plug them into the equation and see what you find out. You might find out that the likelihood of another planet experiencing what we're all about to experience today is incredibly small. Unlike life. And both of these incalculably improbable things happen right here on this planet. What are the odds of that? And maybe this is where I need to hit the woo-woo alarm. Yeah. How is it possible that one planet can experience not just one, but 2 utterly improbable, but completely unrelated phenomena at the same time? It's enough to make you wonder if it was all constructed somehow by a simulation or a deity of some kind. A deity or a creator that wanted to give us a sign that there was something deeper going on in reality. Which is weirdly coming back around to pinning eclipses on gods. But to come back down from woo-woo land for just a second, this might be more evidence for the rare Earth hypothesis. The idea that the conditions that were required to create complex life on Earth are so impossibly rare that we're probably the only life in the universe. Which slides into the anthropic principle, which states that life on Earth is inevitable because the universe is compelled to create some kind of conscious entity in order to observe itself. Now this is the strong anthropic principle. The weak anthropic principle kind of goes in the opposite direction and says that we're really not that special, but we think we're special due to selection bias. You see, coincidences are only coincidences to the people observing them. When you step back and look at the big picture, even the most improbable coincidences start to look inevitable. You know, case in point, you always hear these stories about somebody having a dream about a cousin or an aunt or a family member or somebody close to them anyway, and then they wake up in the morning and found out that that person died. And of course our immediate thought is that maybe this person visited them in the afterlife, or they have some kind of psychic connection to that person, because I mean the probability that this just randomly happened is impossible, right? I mean, you have two variables here: the possibility that you would dream about a specific person on a given night, which is pretty small, and the possibility that any given person would die on any given day, which is also pretty small. But there's 7 billion people on Earth. All of them sleep, all of them dream, and all of them have several family members and loved ones that regularly appear in those dreams. And over 150,000 people die every single day around the world. The odds of those two things lining up at the same time somewhere in the world on any given month, let's say, is actually pretty good. But to the person it happens to, this feels so impossible that it must be paranormal, when it's really just an inevitability that just happened to fall on you. And some people hate it when I talk about this because they want to believe in an afterlife and they like the idea that we have some kind of psychic connection to each other and that there's some deeper level to reality. I like that idea too, but I also like the idea that these improbable coincidences show that I'm just a small part of a big, massively complex machine. And that makes me feel connected to something bigger than myself. So today, whether you're lucky enough to experience the total eclipse firsthand, or if you're just following one of the millions of live streams that are covering it, take a moment and just ponder how unlikely all of this is. And feel that connection, not just to the universe, but to the billions of other people around the planet that are sharing this experience with you. But what do you think of the Scott eclipse equation? What kind of results did you get? Did I leave anything out? Share your thoughts in the comments. And by the way, another totally legitimate argument is that this isn't unusual at all. We're discovering new rocky planets every day, and maybe in the near future we'll be able to start seeing moons around it. It might turn out that our moon isn't that special, that they're all over the place. It's also a legitimate argument to say that the eclipse and complex life forming on Earth are not unrelated. You know, a lot of people do say that complex life on Earth probably wouldn't have formed without the moon.
If you're combat logging,
is just more proof of just how amazing and
you'll
special
be banned
that
when
big
you
ball of cheese in the sky is.
when we change the map. You will not lose the gear from the map
Patreon, my answer files,
you are
who help
on.
support this channel. They get all kinds of cool special stuff.
Okay,
like
so if you're in a
secret
fight,
vlogs that
don't
nobody else
back
gets to
out of
see.
it.
And I want to give a special thanks to the people who just joined in since the last video. It's been a couple of weeks, so I've got a large number of people here. We got Franco Moore, Gard Frederick Skulin, Shantia Dykes, Carol Hulick, Weston Turner, Mika Scotty Cole, and Christopher Cannon. Thank you guys so much for joining. If you guys would like to join them at the big party of Patreon, you can go to Patreon.
See, I'm going to dump that out, and then I'm also going to disinfect this bottle
you get regular canker sores and mouth ulcers. Ouch, they suck. But
with the disinfectant spray, because could have a virus on the outside of the bottle as well.
Prevents them from happening. It actually works. You can try it. Free trial, all that stuff. Go to cankerboy.com. So if this is your first time here, I invite you to check out some of my other videos if you like this topic, because I've got stuff like this that comes out every Monday. And
so now that's a disinfected bottle entirely there.
Thank you guys so much. Please like and share and comment and do all that kind of stuff. In the meantime, enjoy the eclipse. Have an eye-opening week, and I will see you guys next Monday. Love you guys. Take care. This is your last chance. After this, there's no going back. Take the blue pill. Wake up tomorrow in your bed and continue to believe whatever you want to believe. Take the red pill. Stay in Wonderland. And I'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And it'll also clear your sinuses. It's got epinephrine in it. It's good for that. But it'll make you drowsy, so don't operate heavy machinery. And no drinking. Daniel Ball, MLP Luigi, David Wendell, and Ryan G. all asked, can you do a video about the simulation hypothesis? The simulation hypothesis is a really interesting subject, but before I get into any specifics, I want to show off my patented new woo-woo alarm. This is mostly mostly a thought exercise. It's good for a fun discussion, but don't be calling me a loon and saying all kinds of weird things about me, because I'm just sharing this with you. The simulation hypothesis runs into some of the same issues that religions run into, in the sense that they're unfalsifiable. In science circles, unfalsifiable means that it can't be proven or disproven. Doesn't mean it's not real, it just means that we can't prove it's real. At least we're not capable of proving it or disproving it with our current understanding and technologies. So let's establish really quickly what simulation hypothesis is, what it means, and who's behind it. Most people credit the simulation hypothesis to Nick Bostrom, a philosopher and theoretical physicist from the University of Phoenix. Wait, did I say University of Phoenix? I meant Oxford. Oxford. Bostrom published a paper in 2003 in which he postulated that at least one of the following three statements must be true. 1. The human species is very likely to go extinct before reaching a post-human stage. 2. Any post-human civilization is extremely unlikely to run a significant number of simulations of their evolutionary history or variations thereof.
Oh no, it was it was on the YouTube video.
Simulation. In other words, given the exponential growth in our computer power, unless we manage to go extinct, we will eventually be able to run ancestor simulations that are indistinguishable from reality. The only question then becomes,
that was his woo-woo alarm, quote unquote. The scientific community refers to things that are not actually science as quote unquote woo-woo, because they don't match scientific criteria and testability, falsifiability, and such. So when people try to make something sound like it's real, but there's no actual science behind it, they call it woo-woo. So he has this thing he calls his woo-woo alarm. But but yeah. Yeah, that's funny.
Reason why you might be living in a computer simulation. We're already doing it. Online virtual worlds like Minecraft, World of Warcraft, and Grand Theft Auto are already creating virtual spaces where people like you and I can communicate back and forth with each other, obviously on much smaller scales than the universe that we know of. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg. Some of our biggest supercomputers have been used to create simulations of, the evolution of the universe and viral outbreaks and emergency planning and the weather and stuff like that. It's really not hard to imagine a future where computers can handle the ability to create billions of conscious entities, and the people of that time maybe hit a crisis point and do simulations to figure out what went wrong. Does anybody else feel like they're watching us right now and going, oh, Donald Trump? Of course, today when scientists run these simulations, they don't just do one simulation, they do multiple simulations with different variables to see what the results will be. It's not crazy to imagine that someday post-humans would do the same thing, creating basically multiple universes. Reason number 2, the Fermi paradox. Yes, our old friend the Fermi paradox, which asks the question, why do we seem to be alone in this ridiculously huge universe? As the comments to my original Fermi paradox video have shown, there's no end to the answers of this question, but one of those answers has to be that there are no aliens because all this is just a computer simulation. There is an idea put forth by Robert Lanza called biocentrism, which basically says that the universe is created by our own consciousness. In other words, when we took the Hubble Deep Field photograph that revealed thousands of galaxies in a tiny sliver of space that we didn't know were there, those galaxies didn't exist until we looked at them. Much like the photons in the double slit experiment only exist in potentialities of waveforms until we look at it. The rest of the universe grows as we observe it because our observations make it real. This also brings up something called the anthropic principle, which says that the universe must be compatible with the conscious beings that observe it. And there's 2 types of these. The strong anthropic principle says that the universe is compelled to create something to observe itself. In other words, it was designed fundamentally to create life. And the weak anthropic principle states that the universe must be fine-tuned either by a programmer or the program itself in order to meet the needs of the conscious beings inside of it. Like creating more space and universe as we look out into it. Just vast, empty, lifeless space, because it's all part of a simulation. Reason number 3, glitches in the Matrix. In the movie The Matrix, they famously described phenomena like deja vu as glitches in the Matrix, a way to show that something in the Matrix had changed. Oh, deja vu. What is it?
A deja vu is usually a glitch in the Matrix. It happens when they change something.
It was usually a bad thing. But we've all had experiences like that where you walk into a room you've never been before, but you totally feel like you've been there when you think about a loved one or a friend, and then suddenly the phone rings, or you look across the room and you see somebody, and then you glance away and look back and they're not there anymore? Most of these scenarios can be explained by coincidence or just your mind playing tricks on you, but what if it was something else? Paranormal phenomena have been described since the beginning of recorded history. They've been chalked up to ghosts, angels, demons, aliens, psychic residual energies, wormholes to other dimensions, the list goes on and on. Or maybe they're glitches, like we've seen in video games. There's an entire subreddit on this topic, and some of these stories are actually pretty compelling. One Redditor explains that when she's sleeping, oftentimes her family will see her in other rooms of the house, and sometimes she'll just disappear completely. One guy described a recurring dream that he's had his whole life, and then one day he went to a party and saw paintings around the house that perfectly depicted these dreams that he'd always had. One describes a time when some teenagers were holding a tailgating party outside of this kid's house, and as he was looking out the window, he moved to the other side of the window to get a better view, and the entire party just disappeared. Believe it or not. Reason number 4, compromises in simulation algorithms. Who doesn't love a good optical illusion? They're fun, right? Well, the only reason the optical illusions work is because our brain takes shortcuts. This is how our visual field works. It's just too hard to take in all the information all the time, so our brain has created these built-in little algorithms that makes most of our spatial understanding go on autopilot. It's all about saving power. Optical illusions play off of that shortcut by creating incongruence between the object that we're looking at and the context surrounding it. Similarly, there's an incongruence in our universe between the physics of the very small, quantum mechanics, and the physics of the very large, general relativity. In other words, atoms and subatomic particles act completely different than things like stars and galaxies. For the past 100 years, with all the advancements in our understanding and our technology, we have still been unable to combine these two theories. Why would the universe have two different sets of realities? Some have said this is a good argument for the simulation hypothesis. The reason why we have two different realities is because that's what the simulation needs. One of the more popular theories that's tried to combine the quantum and relativistic worlds is called superstring theory, which leads us to our 5th and final reason why you might be living in a computer simulation. Computer code and superstring theory equations. Here's where it gets really weird. Professor James Gates is a theoretical physicist and a leading proponent of superstring theory. He got his PhD from MIT as a professor at the University of Maryland and was given the National Medal of Science and serves on President Obama's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. I tell you all this before we go forward just so that you know that this isn't just some crackpot with a website or something. This dude's legit. And this dude, while cranking away on his string theory equations, found computer code. Computer code that seems to be embedded into the fabric of our universe. And this isn't just a random bit of ones and zeros either. This is a specific type of code called block linear self-dual error correcting code, or BLISTA for short. It's a common bit of code in web browsers that allows the computer to send and receive information and allows it to self-adjust in order to correct for errors. Now, if that makes your brain melt, you're in good company. Neil deGrasse Tyson almost couldn't stand up when he first heard this. But some people argue that this type of code actually shows up in a lot of different types of mathematics, like sphere packing, lattices, reflection codes, octonions, you know, those things. So in case your brain has not been sufficiently turned to mush yet, here's a few other little mind-blowing thoughts about all this. If we are living in an ancestral simulation that's been created by a future civilization, then you are the ancestor of your own creator. You are God's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparent. A creator who, his or herself, would have no idea whether or not they were in a simulation. And think about a couple of centuries down the line when we're able to create these types of simulations with conscious beings that have no idea that they're in a simulation. How deep does this thing go? It's simulations all the way down. So as I said in the beginning, this is really more of a thought experiment. Don't take any of this too seriously. Don't go out and run in front of a train because you know the simulation will save you. It will not. Because even if we were living in a simulation, what would change? You'd still have to eat, you'd still have to go to work, you still have to be a decent human being. It's not like all the rules of life just go flying out the window. From the beginning of time, we have always been a species that has not trusted that reality is what we perceive it to be, that there's something deeper going on. Where does that come from? Is that something unique in our special brains that causes us to think that way? Or was it programmed into us? The choice is yours. Now this is a very high-level look at this whole thing. Really, each one of these reasons could be an entire video into itself. But I'm going to include all kinds of links and stuff in the description below. So have at it in the comments. What are the arguments against this being a simulation? Do you think the simulation argument has merit, or do you think it's a load of crap? Discuss. And after looking at that Reddit page, I have to say I'm really curious about this whole glitches in the Matrix thing. Have any of you had any experiences that you just cannot explain, things that maybe you don't tell anybody because you think they'll all think you're crazy? As always, if you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and if it blew your mind, share it with other people and blow their minds as well. If this is your first time here, I hope I earned you subscribe because I come back with this kind of stuff every Monday. Thanks as always for watching. You guys go out and have an eye-opening week, and I will see you next time. Love you guys. Take care. Hey, it's 2016. I took a few weeks off to recharge my batteries, but we're back, and let's start things off with a really simple question, something that's really easy to answer. Is there a God? Jonathan Juarez asked, "You seem like a really smart guy, Joe, so I'm interested in what religious beliefs you have, and if so, why?" Okay, alright, let's do this. First off, I really appreciate you thinking that I'm smart. But if I do a video on religion, it's pretty much guaranteed that a lot of people will disagree with you by the end of it. There's a reason why they say never discuss politics or religion at the dinner table. But I pissed off a lot of people with my gun control videos, so hey, why not? Flame on! We're gonna talk about God. There's two types of questions that I get asked on here. One is the kind that has an absolute answer. You can just do a Google search and find all the facts yourself. The other type doesn't really have answers out there to be found, so the only thing that I can search is myself. The first one is much easier. Thanks, Jonathan. So religion is a very personal thing, and the only way that I feel like I can answer this is to just tell you the journey that I've been on. So here it goes. I grew up in a very religious family. There were actually a lot of heads of churches in my extended family. We had family reunions every year on Father's Day at this old Indian fort called Fort Belknap, and it consisted of two parts. There was a church service on Sunday mornings, but the night before, on Saturday night, we would all gather and sing hymns as the sun went down. And this was actually my favorite part. As a child, all I knew was that there was a room full of people who all loved each other, they were hugging each other, they hadn't seen each other in a whole year, and they probably weren't going to see each other again for another year. We sang beautiful old-time religion songs that have been handed down for generations. Actually, a lot of them showed up in the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, which made watching that movie kind of overwhelming as all those memories flooded back in. Memories of those songs being sung by a chorus of people who loved me while I played frisbee with my cousins out in a field flecked with hundreds of fireflies. I like those songs. There was absolutely no reason for my 10-year-old self to doubt that there was a God, that he loved me, and that he gave his son's life so that everything I ever do would be forgiven. And I remember the first time I ever heard somebody say that they were an atheist. I was at school, and some kid said that he was an atheist. And I remember one of the other kids asked, "So what do you think happens when you die?" And he was like, "You die and they bury you." And I remember being horrified by that thought. And I remember thinking, like, how could you get out of bed if you actually thought that? But the older I got, the more complex the issue of religion became to me. I saw people from church acting very unchristian, you know, wearing a cross necklace and then judging other people and being rude. I worked in restaurants where I saw firsthand that the church crowd are the worst tippers in the whole world, and a lot of just the little idiosyncrasies of the dogma just didn't add up for me anymore. Like, if God is all-powerful and all-knowing, then why does he need my help and my money? Why did God have to kill his son in order to forgive my sins? Why couldn't he just forgive me? For that matter, why did he make sin in the first place? If God is all love, then why would he send me to hell for eternity because I didn't honor my father and mother correctly? For that matter, why did he make hell in the first place? It just became harder and harder for me to just believe. And then somewhere in my early 20s, I began to seriously consider the possibility that maybe God doesn't exist. I mean, could it be possible that all religion is just a way for us to deal with the fact that we are mortal, that we have an end date? Is it just our way of dealing with the seemingly pointless nature of it all? I didn't want that to be true. It didn't feel true. Of course, you know, speaking in public makes me feel like I'm in mortal danger when I'm actually in no danger whatsoever. feelings can't be trusted? Or is the idea of God such an enduring belief because, much like love, it's something that's very real but can't be measured? So I suppose I've been what one might call a seeker, and that term is viewed in equal parts derision and pride depending on a person's religious stance. But I like that term better than agnostic because the term agnostic seems to imply that you don't really care, and I do care. A lot. Enough to be constantly searching for an answer. But the paradox about being a seeker is that as I'm searching for an answer, I also think that the answer can't be known, which makes me skeptical of anybody who thinks that they do know the answer. Even if somebody says that the answer is that there's no God, because I don't think that's something that you can know. Because to me, it's not really about God. It's about, just reality. I mean, what is this thing? We live in this sensory space around our bodies, and it all makes sense to us. We think we've got a good beat on things. But when you look to the edges of our collective knowledge, you start to see that this whole thing just falls apart. We now think that 94% of our universe is made up of dark energy and dark matter, two things that we have absolutely no proof of outside of indirect observation and math equations. We're finding out that the fundamental particles that make up all matter can pop in and out of existence and be in multiple places at once and only exist in probability states. Probability states that can be affected by observation and actions in the future that haven't even taken place yet. We still aren't 100% sure how gravity works. So for anyone to consider all of that and say that they think they know the answer about God because of what they can see around them, to me, that's just so nearsighted. So you can't trust your feelings and you can't trust your observations. So what can you trust? Nothing. Nothing. Which is exactly what you're supposed to focus on when you meditate. Meditation has been used for millennia as a way to transcend the physical space and enter a higher enlightened consciousness. Every major religion has some form of meditation practice as part of their religion, especially if you consider prayer to be a type of meditation, which many people do. There are amazing stories of people who have had an enlightenment experience while in this state, and in these experiences they come back with knowledge they didn't have before and an absolute certainty that they were able to connect with a higher consciousness. I'll link to one in the comments. It's from Sean Webb of the I Am Spirituality podcast, and he talks about the enlightenment experience that he had, and it is absolutely bananas. I mean, you gotta watch it. Just go check it out. So if people are having this experience, there's a couple of different possible explanations. One might be a surge in DMT. DMT, or trimethyltryptamine, is an endogenous chemical, which means that it's something that our body produces internally. And it also just happens to be one of the most powerful hallucinogenics in the world. People who take doses of DMT have out-of-body experiences where they feel like they've transcended this level of reality and they communicate with otherworldly beings and connect to some shared higher consciousness, which are very similar to near-death experiences. In fact, a lot of people who study it call it the spirit molecule for that reason. But could it be that simple? Is it just our bodies tripping on our own self-made acid? The thing is, people's experiences on DMT are strikingly similar. It's not just that they're having these experiences, it's that they're all having the same experiences. Geometric patterns, feelings of floating, connecting to an unseen entity. Could it be that they're all connecting to the same source, something outside themselves? And if so, how does that work? Well, nobody knows. But there are some theories. One is called OR, or Orchestrated Objective Reduction. And it gets pretty intricate. In fact, I'm just going to read you a line from their Wikipedia page. The qubits are based on oscillating dipoles forming superposed resonance rings and helical pathways throughout microtubule lattices. Yeah. What that guy said. It basically argues that there are microstructures inside the neurons of our brains that allow us to interact on a quantum level with an outside consciousness. Now, this is hotly disputed, okay? But it's not entirely disproven. But let's just go with it for a second and assume that you can connect to an outside consciousness. Where did that come from? I did a video previously about quantum entanglement and how subatomic particles can be connected to other subatomic particles and communicate instantaneously across infinite distances. And since how all matter was created in the Big Bang and spread out from there, that means that connected particles could be interacting with each other all the way across the universe. And how Richard Feynman once theorized that every electron in the universe could be the same electron. Could these infinitely connected subatomic particles communicating instantaneously across all of space and time create some kind of universal superconsciousness? Can non-conscious matter connect in such a way to create a consciousness? Well, the fact that you're watching this means that it can. Your brain is made up of 100 billion neurons, none of which by themselves can hold a memory or make a thought or do anything like that, but they connect in such a way that through chemical and electrical signals, they create a consciousness. And far from being some kind of miracle, this could be a fundamental property of reality itself. This field of study is something that some scientists are calling emergence theory. Emergence is a process whereby larger entities, patterns, and regularities arise through interactions among smaller or simpler entities that themselves do not exhibit such properties. An ant, for example, has a tiny little brain. It just has some encoded instructions in this little cluster of neurons that it follows and has no idea that it is working toward a bigger goal throughout this entire colony of creating entire cities underground. Each cell in your body has tiny little proteins and subcellular mechanisms that are just going about their business, doing their thing. They have no idea that they are serving the larger purpose of keeping the cell alive. And the cell just does its thing and goes about its business, and it has no idea that it's serving the larger purpose of keeping us alive. And we just go about our business and we just do our things, and we have no idea. Does our existence serve a higher purpose that we have no way of seeing ourselves? Emergence says it could. Astrophysics says that the atoms in our bodies are the same as the atoms scattered all throughout the universe. We are a part of that infinity. And quantum physics says that all those atoms have subatomic particles that communicate instantaneously with each other. All of these things point to some very interesting possibilities. And I don't think that some kind of universal superconsciousness, or God, is really out of the question. And for now, that's as far as I'm going to go. I'm sure this won't stir up any comments or anything. Now, none of this really spoke to organized religion. I think that's really more of a societal and psychological thing, and so I didn't really get into that. I just personally think that religions have their good and bad. A lot of really good things have been done in the name of religion, and yeah, a lot of really terrible things have been done in the name of religion. But if it wasn't religion, I think it would have been something else. People are looking for a reason to do the things, a justification to do the things that they want to do in their own life. Whatever it is you believe, if we do serve a higher consciousness, I think the only way we can adequately do so is by connecting and bringing each other together, and not by dividing each other and warring and killing each other. So if I had a cause that I really wanted to promote with this channel, it would be to get people to break out of fundamentalist and tribal thinking, and this idea that something is better based on the fact that it's yours. I honestly believe that if there's some kind of judgment at the end of our lives, either in a spiritual sense or, by history, it's only going to come down to one thing. Did you connect people and bring people together with love and understanding, or did you divide people and push people apart with hatred and fear? Personally, I choose to do the former, and I hope you join me. Thank you all for watching, and to Jonathan for a great question. If you've got a question you'd like answered, you can ask it down in the comments below, or hit me up at Joe Scott Writer on Twitter, and we can do this together. If you like what I had to say here, give me a thumbs up, share it on social media, spread the word about this channel. We're growing, things are going well, and I really appreciate your help with that. So of course, if you liked what I had to say, please hit subscribe. I come back every Monday with more stuff just like this. I hope you guys go out there and have a great, eye-opening week, and I'll see you back here next Monday. Take care. Love you guys. God is in coffee.
One of the great challenges in this world is knowing enough about a subject to think you're right, but not enough about the subject to know you're wrong. There's like a gazillion hours of me on the internet. In almost every case, I'm talking about the universe, black holes, the Big Bang, time travel, God. But what I'm going to do in this masterclass is teach you how to think. The goal here is to train your mind how to see the world differently, how to question what others say. I've come to realize that there are three categories of truth: personal truth, political truths, and the objective truths that shape our understanding of the universe. The interesting thing about an objective truth is that it's true no matter what. Imagine that. By the time we're done, you will be equipped with some of the methods and tools so you can turn data into information, information into knowledge, knowledge into wisdom. We all have susceptibility to bias. Search engines on the internet are the epitome of confirmation bias. And you're going to use that as evidence that you are correct? No. The good thing about science is that it's true whether or not you believe in it. What does it mean to be skeptical? What does it mean to be convinced by data? A proper skeptic questions what they're unsure of, but recognizes when valid evidence is presented to change their mind. I will equip you to not only find objective truths, but then communicate to others how to get there. It's not good enough to be right. You also have to be effective. The less connected you are to what is objectively true, the less likely you will be able to make decisions that will benefit your life, the life of your family, and even civilization itself. I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, and this is my master class.
Count likes, calories, hours, minutes, points and scores, friends and follows. We measure our weight and tally our steps. Every day we stare at screens, press buttons, and count. But we don't count what really counts. Our moments together. We'll never know how many chances we'll get to gather by the ocean under a blue sky. Or make the best of a rainy day. How many chances will we have to dance, or forgive, or break the awkward silence with a joke? How many opportunities will there be for us to pack our bags and embark on an adventure? Sometimes we forget that the things that count the most are those that can't be counted. That's why Verbo believes in the immeasurable value of vacation, together, in giving people unique spaces to share moments with each other, anywhere in the world. We might get caught up in the everyday sometimes. We might keep on counting, but we'll always turn back to what matters. The time we have to just be together.
I just got back from vacation. I seem to have picked up a little travel cred. You might hear that in my voice. Now, my wife and I just had our 10th anniversary, so we took a trip to New York City. We wanted to find someplace quiet and relaxing to spend together, and that was not the right place. But no, we had fun. She's never been before, and it's definitely a place you gotta experience to really get a feel for it, you know. So we went around, we saw all the sights. Here's some pictures if you need proof. That's not what this video is about. What this video is about is that moment that happens in every vacation sometimes, and it's a day or two before you're about to leave, and you realize that this experience you're having is about to end, and you've gotta get on a plane and get back to mundane reality, and there's just no getting around that. So you have that moment, you allow yourself to feel that angst for just a minute, and then you get up and get on with the business of having a good time, you know? Enjoy it while you can. That's why you're here. They say all good things must come to an end. And this is true, because all things come to an end, good and bad. You know, jobs, relationships, life itself, they all eventually blink out of existence. Eventually everything will end. But how? When we talk about the scales of the universe, whether it's size or time, we get into some insane numbers that our brain cannot really even comprehend. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. On a timeline, the entire existence of the human race would be this little red dot right here. I mean, can you even see that? To bring all that home even further, when you look at the demographics of this channel, the average age of a viewer here is about 30 years old. Your life has taken up 0.00000002% of the existence of the universe. Not that bad, really. But we, and the universe, are just at the beginning. The timeline of the universe is insanely long and full of endings. When will the human race end? Let's start with something fun. That the human race will come to an end someday is certain. How it will happen comes down really to two different options: extinction or evolution. And if we go the route of extinction, the most likely bringer of our doom is ourselves. Overpopulation, nuclear war, pandemics, runaway greenhouse effect, AI gone crazy, all of these options are things that we can do to ourselves to bring this party to an end. But even if we do manage to avoid all that, nature has a few tricks of her own up her sleeve. And by tricks, I mean unholy terrors. Supervolcanoes, comet impacts, gamma ray bursts, baboon uprisings, all of these are statistically likely to happen at some point in our future, especially the baboon uprisings. But even if we survive everything that we and nature throw at ourselves, eventually the human race is still going to end because we won't be humans. I covered recently how we might change as a species if we lived on Mars, and it is inevitable that if we were, subjected to those different conditions that we would change in some way. But even if we stayed right here on Earth, evolution is inevitable. There is an argument to be made, and many do, that the human race isn't going to evolve anymore because we've reached the point technologically that we can control the environment. Therefore, there's no need for us to change. But I would argue that our ability to control the environment would actually accelerate our evolution because the environment that we have created to live in is not the one that we evolved in. In only the last few hundred years, we have completely removed ourselves from the natural world that we were designed for. This equates to a massive change in environment that, over time, we're going to adapt to that. Throw in our new technology of genetic manipulation, and you're basically throwing gasoline on the evolutionary fire because we're actually controlling our evolution. But nothing will change us faster than our imminent merging with technology. In just the last 60 years, artificial intelligence has gone from a science fiction trope to something that we are, existing with every day in our lives. We've already merged with technology in an external sense. I mean, you just learned information about the eventual baboon uprisings from a computer device watching this video. And it's fully expected in the near future this merging will become internal, allowing us to merge with the ever-increasing power of artificial intelligence. This, of course, is transhumanism. When the last Homo sapiens dies out is hard to say. As this technology becomes more democratized and available to all, the holdouts are going to kind of become second-class citizens, be subjected to confinement, maybe even put in zoos until maybe about 1,000 years or so, when the last human being held in captivity finally slips away. Now, obviously, trying to pin down the future of humanity is next to impossible, but the future of planet Earth, you have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen there. How the Earth will end. The species that we become may in the far future be bailing from planet Earth like rats from a flaming ship, because basically, the Earth is going to become a flaming ship. The sun right now is at a stage they call main sequence. It's a main sequence star. This means that it's fusing hydrogen into helium in the cauldron at the core of the sun. And when, basically you get a whole lot of matter, you get a whole lot of gravity. A lot of gravity creates a lot of pressure and heat. A lot of pressure and heat creates fusion, and fusion creates an outward energy. The sun is the size that it is because it's created a balance between the gravitational force pushing in and the force of the fusion energy pushing out. It basically creates enough of a cauldron inside to fuse hydrogen into helium, but not enough to fuse helium together. But eventually it will run out of hydrogen, meaning that outward force will weaken, gravity will take over, it'll crush down even further, this time enough to crush helium into carbon. Fusing higher mass atoms produces more energy, so now it has to find a new balance between gravity and that outward energy. So the sun's going to actually expand out to about the orbit of Earth. This would be the sun's red giant phase. And this will be the Earth's Ark of the Covenant phase. The sun will actually cool a little bit in this phase. It's going to go down to about 2,000 to 3,000 degrees Celsius, which will shift the light red, hence the term red giant, but it'll still be hot enough to turn the Earth into a massive ball of molten rock. This massive rock will see its orbit slowed by colliding with particles in the sun. This slowed down orbit will allow gravity to take over, and it will eventually plunge down into the core of the sun, joining what's left of Mercury and Venus. It's estimated that the sun has about 5 billion years of hydrogen left to fuse, which will give our descendants plenty of time to move into the outer solar system, where a new habitable zone will be made. In fact, Enceladus and Europa would be great candidates because it will be warm enough for all their ice to melt and have water. But long before the red giant phase, the sun is going to slowly increase in temperature, about 30 to 40% in the next billion years, which would make it hot enough to boil off all the oceans on Earth, making it uninhabitable. So all life on Earth will be gone in about 1 billion years, but in about 5 billion years, the entire Earth itself will be no more. point, the inner solar system is completely toast, but the outer solar system may have a bit of a second life, as it has a new habitable zone in our solar system, but even that eventually is going to come to an end. So how does the solar system end? Well, after about 1 billion years or so of peacocking around the Milky Way as a big red giant, the sun's going to run out of helium that it can fuse into carbon, and it will blast its outer layers out into a planetary nebula, leaving only its core behind as a white dwarf. The white dwarf version of the sun will be about half the mass of the original sun, but about the same size as Earth, meaning that a teaspoon of the surface of the white dwarf sun would weigh about as much as a car. But you wouldn't want to try this. The gravity at the surface of the sun will be about 350,000 times more than here on Earth, so, you know, you might break your spoon. That would be bad. At this point, there's not really any chance of life in the solar system anymore. It is possible for a white dwarf to sustain life, but the planet would have to orbit 75 times closer than Earth does to the sun, and there's not going to be anything there because the red giant kind of ate everything in that area. So any life that might have moved to the outer solar system in that habitable zone would now not have enough energy to sustain life anymore, so all of that life would go away. But let's just say in the far future we had the technology to move a planet from the outer solar system down closer to the white dwarf. That might actually be a great way to go because white dwarfs last a very, very long time. White dwarfs are expected to radiate energy out for 10 to the 35 years until eventually they run out of energy and become a black dwarf. Black dwarfs, by the way, are only theoretical. The universe hasn't been around long enough to actually create one yet. But what happens to the planets when the sun goes down to a white dwarf? Well, according to a study that was published in 2009 in Universe Today, the lower mass of the sun would, of course, have less gravity, causing the planets in the outer solar system to drift outward over time. But thanks to the giant mass of Jupiter, it would create perturbations in the orbits of these planets and in the asteroid belt, causing them to get all smashed together, creating a giant dust cloud in the planetary nebula around the white dwarf. A dust cloud that will be moving ever outward from the star as it cools for the next million, trillion years, until it, too, ends. But actually, long before the white dwarf's sun cools off, the galaxy has a very different fate in store. So how will the Milky Way end? Galaxies tend to cluster into groups, and the group that we are in right now is named, creatively, the local group. The local group is part of the Virgo cluster, which is part of the Laniakea supercluster, so now you won't get lost if you go out on a really long walk. And the closest galaxy to us in the local group is the famous Andromeda galaxy, 2.5 million light years away. Or maybe infamous would be a better word for that, because, that thing's headed right for us. The Milky Way and Andromeda galaxies are kind of like long-distance pen pals that fell in love, and about 4 billion years from now, they're going to finally meet up and make sweet, sweet star love. At this point, the Milky Way galaxy, as we know it, will cease to be, and it will be a combined galaxy with Andromeda that we've already named Milkdromeda. Milkdromeda will be an elliptical galaxy, which basically means it's just going to be a big giant mess of stars instead of the beautiful spiral galaxies that we know and love right now. But the collision from our vantage point will be fairly safe. It's not like we're going to be smashed into by other stars and stuff like that. It's expected because there's so much room between all the stars that there'll be very few collisions between planets and stars and stuff like that, although some stars might get flung out from gravitational forces from the galaxy. In fact, the night sky during this time would be friggin' amazing, except for the fact that in 1 billion years the Earth is going to be like a 1,000-degree wasteland, so, you know, great view, terrible weather. So technically the Milky Way as we know it will not be around anymore after 4 billion years, but Milkdromeda could actually get bigger over time. It's thought that in 150 billion years or so, all the galaxies in the local group could converge on Milkdromeda, forming a super galaxy of sorts. Now, all this stellar wife swapping could lead to a whole new explosion of stars in this super galaxy, except it's also possible that most of the hydrogen will have already kind of been fused out at that point, so there won't be as much fuel. So it's possible that this stellar orgy might not result in as many stellar pregnancies as we might think. Really hate that I just said it that way. Ultimately, the fate of the Milky Way galaxy and all galaxies of the universe as the larger stars go supernova and the smaller stars go down to white dwarfs. These white dwarfs will be spread further and further apart as dark energy takes over, which leads us to the end of the universe. The end of the universe is as mysterious as the beginning of the universe, but there are 3 main theories that have been offered so far to explain what could happen. The first theory is called the Big Crunch. This theory states that eventually gravity will cause the universe to stop expanding and eventually reverse direction and crunch back in together before it creates another singularity and explodes into another Big Bang, starting that cycle all over again like a cosmological heartbeat. Now, this was a really popular theory for a really long time because it just kind of makes sense. It just works. You don't have to explain how the universe began because it was always there. You don't have to explain how it ends because it comes back together again. It's just beautiful and cyclic, and it just works. Except it doesn't work. As Edwin Hubble famously pointed out, the universe is not only expanding, the expansion is accelerating. And it seems to have accelerated past the point where gravity could pull it back together again. It sort of reached escape velocity. On the other extreme is the Big Rip theory. This states that eventually the expansion of the universe will increase exponentially, eventually ripping apart the fabric of space-time itself, dissolving all matter at the atomic level. That sounds fun. But the most accepted theory of the universe amongst cosmologists is what's known as the Big Freeze, also called heat death of the universe. In this scenario, dark energy continues to expand the universe to the point that all matter is so spread apart that it can't interact with other matter. And as all the stars die out, eventually all that's left are black holes and red dwarf stars. Red dwarf stars would eventually lose all their energy, and then through proton decay would become just giant cold spheres of lead. Black holes would eventually lose their energy and evaporate due to Hawking radiation, leaving the biggest black holes to go away in about 10 to 100 years from now. Literally a Google years. This many years. At this point, the universe has absolutely no energy to it whatsoever. Literally light years between every atom, just an endless expanse of nothingness, signaling the end of everything. So what did we learn today, kids? We learned that the timeline of the universe is mind-numbingly long. If you graphed it out, the entire universe so far would be like just a fraction of a pixel. We learned that everything eventually ends and there's just no point to anything. Nothing at all. Except the point that we give it. So don't dwell on the fact that the universe is all going to completely end someday. Just appreciate it while it's here. You know, feel the angst, and then get up and get on with the business of enjoying yourself. Because that's why you're here in the first place. So how does all that make you feel? Did that depress you? I didn't want to depress you. Don't be depressed. If you disagree with my assertion of how things might go in the future, please let me know in the comments. I know you will. Also, I keep getting comments, people asking me where to find my shirts. I talk about it in every single video. You can find this shirt and many more fun, science, nerdy, witty shirts at the store at answerswithjoe.com/shirts. Go there, get one, you'll love it. So this is the part of the video where I give a big shout out and a thanks to all the people on Patreon for helping me do what I do. I can't express my thanks enough, but right now I want to point out, give a shout out to one specific guy, a guy named Luke. He actually has contributed at the highest level that I have up on the thing. I actually didn't think that anybody would do it at that level, but he did, and I owe him a huge thanks, and it's time to give you a nice little spot up by yourself because you've earned it. Luke, I have given you Luke Skywalker. I got this online. I'm not taking it out of the box because it's special, because you're special. There you go. I'm going to put you right up there. That is where Luke lives, and hopefully you can see it. Thank you, Luke, so much. I really do appreciate it. Also, I want to shout out the newest Patreon supporters. There's actually a whole lot on this list because I had gotten ahead on videos before, so some of these are from people a way back. I'm going to pound through these as fast as I possibly can, but I really appreciate you guys. There's Marco Van Wyck, Ryan Anthony, Charles Dunlop, Charlie Livingston, Anthony Lusitano, GTS, Michael Marshall, Bob Sinsek, Adam Carr, Johannes Vaught, Chanon, Guy Talmore, Timothy A. Britz Jr., Ross Glore, Trevor LeClaire, Richard's Radio Room, Nick Berry, Daniel Thompson, Marco Bogarski, Tom Micheline, Michael Sobel, Chris McQuay, Stuart Hall, Dan Ferguson, Leslie Raswell, PM Hendricks, Sven Avendowski, Jan Jacobson, Tom Greast, Audrey Limkin, Christina Papalosuro, I didn't mess that one up, Thomas Lamont, Ben Harding, Luke Dobek, Marcus Andre Nodal, Ruben Mendoza, Jonas, and Carl P. Corliss. Wow, thank you guys so much. If you would like to join them, get access to cool perks that other people don't get access to, of course, you can go to patreon.com/answerswithjoe. Please like and share this video if you liked it, and if it's your first time here, check out some of my other stuff. You might like that too, and if you do, hit subscribe. You'll be the first to see my new videos every Monday and Thursday. Thanks again for watching. You guys go out now and have an eye-opening week, and I'll see you next Monday. Love you guys. Take care. There's a small coast of Florida that's home to a tiny... lizard called the green anole, or Carolina anole. Actually, they're not just on that island in Florida. I see them in my backyard all the time here in Texas, but something happened on this particular island that got the attention of biologists all around the world. And what happened was an invasion of a different type of anole called the brown anole, or the Cuban. Insert your favorite Cuban immigrant joke here. What happened that was so interesting was that these two species started battling it out for resources, which caused the green anoles to move up higher in the trees for food and to mate and stuff like that. And this had an interesting effect, because the smaller, younger branches at the top of the tree are smoother than the trunks and limbs and barkier areas of the tree down below. The lizards that had the larger foot pads had a better grip, meaning they could eat more and reproduce more. And in only 15 years, these green anoles on this Florida island changed. Their feet are now 10% bigger than the lizards that I see in my backyard. Evolution is a long-term process. It takes place over hundreds of thousands and millions of years. But sometimes a drastic change in environmental factors can trigger rapid evolution, like we're seeing with our little green friends. I've talked previously about all the challenges involved in getting to and living in the harsh environment of Mars. But let's just say we beat the odds and we actually set up a permanent human presence there. How would that change us? How long would it take? How exactly will Earthlings become Martians? Anatomically, modern humans have been around for about 200,000 years or so, and we really haven't changed that much in that time, but there are some regional differences that have come up in response to environmental factors. In fact, that's all race is. A set of genetic mutations that gave advantages in certain environmental conditions. People from Africa, for example, where the sun beats down like an angry god, developed thicker hair and darker skin because people with thicker hair and darker skin survived longer and reproduced more and collected more vibranium. Populations in Europe and the Nordic regions where they got very little sun developed lily white skin because they were able to absorb more of the sun's rays and produce more vitamin D and hammers. There are examples of these kinds of adaptations all over the world. People who live in really high altitude regions like the Tibetan Plateau and the Andes Mountains were able to develop genetic mutations that allow them to live in a low pressure, low oxygen environment, conditions that would leave the rest of us, gasping for air in the fetal position. It's thought that it's a mutation in their hemoglobin expression that makes this possible. On the flip side, you have the Bajau people of Southeast Asia. They're also known as the sea nomads, and they've been using free diving as a way to secure food and trade for thousands of years. It's estimated that the average Bajauan spends 60% of their time in the water, and they can hold their breath for up to 13 minutes. That, by the way, is insane. 13 minutes is probably about as long as this video is going to be. So just start holding your breath now. See if you can make it to the end. Go ahead. Try it. And studies have shown that the Bajau people have spleens that are 50% larger than populations in the surrounding area. The reason that matters is there's a thing called the spleen squeeze that's part of our dive reflex. Basically, it squeezes oxygenated blood into the rest of our system. The bigger the spleen, the more oxygenated blood, the longer you can stay underwater. The dive reflex is actually kind of fascinating. It's this thing that we all do, which has led some evolutionary biologists to assume that maybe there was an aquatic phase of our early evolution. They call it the aquatic ape theory. So yeah, while human evolution takes place over millions of years, adaptations can occur fairly quickly in extreme conditions. But no extreme condition on Earth comes anywhere close to the extreme conditions on Mars. Now there are dozens of factors that we need to adjust if we were to live on Mars, but we're going to focus here on 4 of them. Low gravity, high solar radiation and cosmic rays, no bacterial life, and low air pressure. Low gravity is the biggie. Mars's gravity is 1/3 that of Earth, and all evolution that we know of, human or animal, has taken place in Earth gravity, so this is a bit of a wild card. It's assumed that the low gravity would lead to bone density loss like we see in astronauts on the ISS. Astronauts in a microgravity environment actually lose 1-2% of their bone density every month. There's actually a name for this. It's called spaceflight osteopenia. While this bone loss wouldn't be as bad on Mars because there's some gravity there, some speculate that this would favor people with thicker bone density and higher bone mass because they'll be able to lose more of it throughout their lives without, getting broken all the time. And this includes the cranium, meaning our heads are going to get bigger. On the other hand, lower gravity means that our hearts wouldn't have to work as hard to pump blood throughout our body. This could actually lead to weak hearts and maybe even cardiovascular issues, so some think that we may actually grow much taller to compensate for that. So perhaps over time, Martians will grow both stockier and taller. Now, one thing's for sure, while an Earth person might really enjoy going to Mars and enjoying that light gravity, somebody that's acclimated to Mars would be miserable on Earth. Imagine going on a vacation and carrying 3 times your body weight the whole time. Now, on to solar radiation. Mars does not have a magnetic shield like we do and a very thin atmosphere, so people on Mars are going to be dealing with significantly higher amounts of radiation than we do here on Earth. Overall, this would accelerate the number of genetic mutations, which could lead to more cancer, so probably people with better DNA repair processes at the cellular level would have the advantage. And just like the people in Africa grew darker skin in response to more solar radiation, people on Mars might grow darker skin as well. Dark skin, of course, comes from the pigment melanin, but some people speculate that maybe melanin won't be strong enough to protect from both the solar radiation and the cosmic rays that you would be seeing on Mars. And they expect that maybe we would evolve to use carotenoids, which would give us dark orange. Now, ironically, Mars is further from the sun than Earth, which means it makes it a little bit darker there. They say that the best day on Mars is about as bright as a very cloudy day here on Earth, so it might be expected that our eyes would grow bigger just like nocturnal animals. Now, here on Earth, we live in of microbial life, some of which are constantly trying to kill us, some of which we couldn't live without. Mars would have none of that. This might lead over time to changes in our digestive system
Well,
because we rely so much on our gut microbiome for that.
I didn't think there was 45 of them. Jesus Christ.
Without exposure to the sea of microbes that we're swimming in every day, an isolated population quickly loses resistance to those microbes. And don't kid yourself, people on Mars are going to be isolated AF. Just look at what happened to the First Nations people here in the Americas when the Europeans came over. 90% of that population was wiped out by smallpox, flu, and the measles.
Wow.
And they live on the same planet. Plus, as I mentioned in a previous video, concentrations of perchlorates in the Martian soil could mess with our thyroid and affect our immune systems even further. Now, this isn't meant to say that humans on Mars are going to be like the boy in the bubble, although they kind of will be. They'll have a resistance to their own microbes. It'll be evolving over time as well. But what this will do is further isolate the Martian populations from the Earthlings because contact with them will be incredibly dangerous, and maybe eventually it will even become banned, just like we now ban, reaching out to uncontacted tribes in the Amazon or on North Sentinel Island because contact with our germs could wipe out their populations. Less contact means less opportunity for interbreeding, which would just accelerate speciation. You might see something of an exponential S-curve going on there. And last but not least is the low air pressure on Mars. As I was talking